What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me are my two great co-hosts, Fede Perez and Ralph Hannah. And guys, here we are. It is 2024. Happy New Year to everyone that celebrates. Obviously, here we are in year 4 of Guarani Vision. It's hard to believe that we're already in year 4 after such a wonderful time that we've had together covering multiple things in Paraguayan football. Obviously, we've been really fortunate for the support and the traction that we've gotten over the years, and we hope that we can continue to get that in this big year for Paraguayan football from a club standpoint, from a national team standpoint. Obviously, a lot is going to be made on the national teams and on all fronts, and of course, how the clubs are going to do. So, yeah, I'm excited about it. Obviously, here in 2024, it's a big year for me and Ralph here based in the States, and for Fede as well in Paraguay, of tournaments that are going on all across South America. It's a big one. It's a big one to see where Paraguay stand in this kind of whole process. But let's go into our co-hosts and let's go to Fede, who I've had the fortune of seeing with his beard, and now he's all clean shaven, ready to start the new year on a new phase. Hopefully, a new uh, mentality, I guess, on how he's going to view Paraguayan football as a whole. I mean, we'll see what kind of takes he has this year. But Fede, man, how are you? It's good to see you, and yeah, looking forward to a really big 2024 for all of us.
Hi, Roberto. Hi, Ralph. Happy New Year to everybody that's always listening to Guarani Vision. Like we do it here, Paraguayan football, but just like nobody does it in English. And that's what we do here another year. I'm so happy to be back. We got together, Roberto. We got to see each other right before the holidays, right before the craziness of Christmas and New Year's. That's always a crazy time, especially here in Paraguay. Now the city's pretty much empty in January. You guys know what I'm talking about. Everybody off to the beach, everybody off to their vacations. But yeah, enjoy the summer a bit while we're waiting for football to start back. I'm actually already, I'm already thinking about those games. I'm already waiting for those big matches to come up. I want football to be back around. To be honest with you guys, we had so much going on between this off season, even with hard and sad news. I mean, it's not the way I wanted to start off, but apparently this Apertura will be named in honor and memory of Ivan Almeida Romero, who unfortunately left us on December 23rd, right before Christmas, which an unfortunate news that he passed away. And his son still plays in first division. I mean, he actually got the opportunity to manage him last season in Taquari. He's going to be back now in Olympia. I'm talking about Ivan Almeida's son, his father, also a legend of the Paraguayan game itself, one of the best coaches this country has seen. And Ivan was kind of trying to make his own life, also trying to make his own as a head coach lately. He has certain success, and you can see that he still had a whole career in front of him, only 45 years old. And the Apertura will be named after him. I think the Clausura will be named after Nacional, who is going to turn 120 years old also in this 2024. We saw a lot of several good players also leave our league. Roberto, we got to talk about that. The best players are the ones that are always get bought, right? That's what happened last year with Julian Sisu, with Enzo Gonzalez that went to the Premier League. Hopefully, we still can get a couple of signings like that. I don't know. There's a couple of names still going around that could go to big leagues. I'm following what's going on with Ramon Sosa, for instance. Fulham is still apparently after him. There was even mentions of Everton, and we're talking about one of the best players in the national team, probably the best player in the national team as of last year. Talk about the big signings, the Pre-Olímpico, the Sudamericano, the under-23 is going to play in just a couple of days. We got to talk about that list because there's a whole bunch of good players on that team, and it's been over 20 years since we haven't been to an Olympic Games. So I'm looking forward to having a good Pre-Olympico and maybe clinch one of those two spots. Roberto Ralph, it's so good to be back. I'm ready to kick it off in this
Yeah,
2024.
yes, Ralph. Obviously, we are glad to have you on board, and just like Fede had mentioned, obviously, you always providing your insight on what's going on with Paraguayans, be it in Paraguay, abroad, women's players as well. Obviously, we have the CONCACAF Gold Cup where Paraguay will be participating right in your backyard starting next month. So yeah, it's a lot to go with, and yeah, unfortunately, we do have to mention the sad passing of Ivan Almeida, the legendary the son of the legendary Everu Almeida, also the father of Diaz Almeida, a player at Olimpia. It was really sad when I was there in Paraguay and just hearing about it. I didn't know about this heart condition that he had, and yeah, he was so young to pass away as well. It's really unfortunate to see that occur to him because he was I think it was like 45 or something, so very young, and he was making his career as a manager at Tacuarembó. Obviously, had his time at I think at River Plate as well. So yeah, really sad news about what happened to him and to his family as well.
Yeah, that's right. It's a sad note to start the podcast, but I also wanted to say Ivan Almeida was also he was very much loved by a lot of the pundits as well, because obviously Fede works at Tigo Sports where he was working because he was doing punditry. Sometimes he was becoming a coach. He was kind of often between the two jobs. And I remember actually when Ever, his father, was very ill with COVID. If you remember, during the pandemic, he was really hospitalized and very sick, and he pulled through. And then we found out that about this heart condition, but it was still obviously a huge surprise to everybody. Anybody who saw Ivan Almeida, he looked very fit, in good shape. He was, he was very active on the sidelines and looked like he could still probably play a little bit as well. And one thing to mention about that, what has been the effect of Ivan Almeida's passing? Well, Sportivo Ameliano's coach has resigned, and he's called Botellón Garcia because he is a big guy. He's very big. He's not in good shape. And he said after what happened to Ivan, he basically got scared thought about his life, his future, the pressure of being a coach. And despite having a really good season with Ameliano, a return to Ameliano, Humberto Garcia has actually stepped down as a coach, and he's going to take some time off. It looks like he's going to try and, look after himself, lose some weight, get fit. But it's interesting to see that the effect this has happened in the industry in Paraguay. And so we have the Apertura named after him, but also I think we have a positive legacy of maybe people, especially coaches, looking after themselves and thinking about the stress the game can cause as well. But moving on to something more positive, right? We're talking about all this international football coming up. We've got the women's under 17s as well. I don't think we mentioned that's also starting. They have a tournament, a CONMEBOL tournament. You have the senior team here in Houston, where I'm going to be, and hopefully going to the games for the CONCACAF Women's Gold Cup, and then the Preolímpico that I'm sure we're about to get into. And with the Preolímpico, of course, we said they haven't been there for 20 years, and the coach at the time, 20 years ago, is back, right? It's Carlos Jara Saguier, who he guided Paraguay to that silver medal back in Athens in 2004. We spoke to one of the players. If you go back in the archives, spoke to Freddy Barreiro, who at the time won a silver medal with Paraguay. And so he's back coaching Saguier, and let's see if he can kind of find some of that magic with this new generation.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. And obviously we'll go into that right now, as Paraguay will be participating in the pre-Olympic tournament happening in Venezuela in about a couple of days. Obviously, the way this works is there are obviously 10 teams from CONMEBOL divided into 2 groups of 5. The first 2 from each group will qualify to the final round. And then the final 2 from those 4 teams in the final stage will qualify for the Olympics in Paris. And looking at Paraguay's group real quick, they're in a really tough one. They're in a really tough one where they go against Argentina, obviously a team that's always been talented, obviously have been to Olympic Games, 2 Olympic gold medals as well. Uruguay, always very strong, reigning U20 champions at the minute over there in Uruguay. Chile and Peru also rounding off kind of the South Cone type of group over there in Group B. But looking at honestly the team as a whole, it's a really a who's who's there. But also you look at some of the names, and I'm going to Fede on this one, on some of the names that Carlos Jara Saguier wasn't able to call up. He wasn't able to call up the likes of Romeo Benitez, Paranaense, Damian Bobadilla, Matias Segovia, Julio Enciso, coming back from his injury from Brighton, Diego Gonzalez of Lazio, Hugo Cuenca is having a really good time at Milan at the Primavera, is probably going to get a call up to the first team very, very soon. Matias Galarza, Talleres, and many other players that haven't been called up. But looking at the list, there are some big names to mention, some who have already played on the Paraguay national team, like Diego Gomez at Inter Miami, Ivan Leguizamon from San Lorenzo, Enzo Gonzalez at Wolves. Hasn't been getting a lot of game time for the first team at all, and Wolves have decided to put him into this pre-Olympic tournament for playing time essentially. So, and looking at some of the other players as well, you got Alex Cantero, really good player, Willer Veira. Obviously, there's been some really Fernando Cardoso, another nice name that I think a lot of people will have some attention on. So, yeah, I just want your thoughts really on Paraguay's list and just their chances of getting out of this group and ultimately to qualify for the Olympics in Paris, which, like you said, it's been 20 years since Athens. Hard to believe that Paraguay have been able to play in an Olympic tournament.
Yeah, first of all, it is a new process with Carlos Santos Jara Xavier, which has not managed big teams lately. If you look at his resume, he actually was managing second, third division. He hasn't had many opportunities in the first division lately. Well, that's actually happened with a lot of coaches that kind of have gone over time, right? You're seeing that in first division lately, they're only hiring young coaches, and for people like Carlos Carasayer, who has a tremendous curriculum, especially with what he was able to get in 2004 with the only medal that this country has ever seen. You would have thought he would be in a different place in his career right now, after 20 years of that, of what happened back then. But I would say that both the national team and he also needed the national team. He kind of needed that comeback because we haven't been able to go back to an Olympic game, and no one has really been able to manage the young players. Also, it's kind of been hard to put more than 3-4 names in the senior national team from the under 23. So hopefully that transition does happen now. Besides the fact of qualifying, obviously, to the Olympic Games, I want to see some of these big names, some of the names that before the tournament starts, that they have good games, and hopefully that they pass that exam. And Daniel Garnero, the head coach of the senior team, is obviously going to be following this tournament, taking notes, and maybe a couple of those names we might see get their chance. Also on the Copa America, even some of these names on the list have already played on the senior national team. You mentioned Alexis Cantero, Ivan Leguizamon is also there. He was one of the last names called. He plays in Argentina and San Lorenzo. There's a couple of names that I've never seen, like Juan Jose Cardoso from Argentinos Juniors from Argentina. Also, he's a midfielder. But then there are names that you're thinking that the team is going to be built around. Obviously, Enzo Gonzalez, after what he's done in Wolverhampton and obviously the time that he spent there, we'll see what he can bring to the team from the creative point of view, because he's going to be, I think, in that midfield trying to create football for this team. Diego Gomez is going to have to be probably one of the best midfielders. There's a lot of expectations around him. I think he's going to have to be even one of the leaders, right? Because he is playing alongside with Messi. So the expectation with these players, I think it's above the average with the rest. And they're going to have to outshine. They're going to have a great tournament, besides the fact that they're already playing in big teams. And that was the big problem with the names that you mentioned, Roberto, with the names that couldn't come. And I don't understand the situation between FIFA, CONMEBOL, and the Olympic Games. Why aren't these players available for us? Why can't we bring them to our national team? I understand Brazil. I understand Argentina. They have way too many players. They can deal with this situation. We don't have that many players. The players that are left out are the best players. And those are the players that can take us to the Olympic Games. So unfortunately, we do have to build a team besides that situation. And yeah, I'm hoping for a great tournament from Kevin Parsahuk. I think he's going to be the starting nine, probably the center forward in this team. And then I have a lot of doubts in other aspects of this team. I'm talking about defense. I'm talking about the goalkeeper position. I look at all three goalkeepers that were called up, and none of them have yet had time in first division. So we're going to have to see how this team reacts in competition, Roberto. And I talked about a new process, but this process started kind of late. It started last year. It started at, I believe, mid-year last year. That's when Carlos Harazaguer took over. That's when he started looking for players. And he kind of had to get together a whole new coaching staff because the ones that are working with him, besides him for this tournament, are really young coaches, Ralph. So I don't know how the chemistry between the head coach and the rest of the staff and with the players is going to be because most of these players have not had much time to practice or to get together and ready for this tournament. But obviously, we've been there. We've gotten a silver before, so we got to get back to the Olympic Games eventually after 20 years.
Yeah, the big game I think is you would hope we can beat Chile and Peru. Those would be two games we're aiming to win. And then really the big game and to get that second place is with Uruguay, who Paraguay are playing tomorrow in a friendly. They're actually in Punta del Este right now, getting ready for that friendly, and then they're going to play for real in Venezuela. And I think that's going to be a really key game to see if they can get through the group, because that's the first task, right? Just getting through the group. And then you have to try and finish in the top two, which means you need to knock out either Brazil or Argentina. So it's a huge task. It's very difficult, especially missing some of the players you mentioned. It's a big year though, I think, for a lot of these players. Like you were saying, there's some players that are there to really become the leaders of the team. So Enzo Gonzalez, Diego Gomez. But then you have some players that that after this tournament, they're going back to their clubs and they have a big opportunity. I'm talking about Gilberto Flores, for example, the Libertad centre-back who was getting some game time. Then he kind of missed out on that game time, but Barbosa has just been sold by Libertad. We'll talk about that a bit more as we do the Apertura preview, but essentially it's a left-footed centre-back. It's the position that he can fill and he can play. So is he going to take an important role for his team? Parsa like he mentioned as well, he's looking more and more like he's going to become a key player for Olympia. We'll talk about them as well, whether they can sign players, whether they can't sign players because of the FIFA sanction. It's everything's kind of moving around, but they've called him back from Guarani, where he was on loan and where he was playing very well and getting minutes. They've let Alan Wilk go, who was his kind of partner in the reserves and under 20s. So they're probably banking a lot on Parsa. And then you have someone like Marco Gomes as well, who for Olympia has had times where he's been a key player in that midfield and times where maybe he wasn't. The same with Wilder Vieira and Cerro. There's been moments when you thought Vieira was going to be the next player to get sold by Cerro abroad, and then he kind of dropped off a bit and Bobadilla upped his level, and it's Bobadilla who made the jump to Brazil. So I think there's a lot of kind of storylines for these players. They're in different positions of where they might go. But this is a huge tournament for all of them for those different reasons. And yeah, the big question is how do we match up against Uruguay and how do we match up against Argentina, because those are going to be the key games. Maybe we don't beat Argentina in the first round group, but you're going to have to beat them in the second round to have a chance to go to Paris.
It's a big task, and like I mentioned before, this to Fede, I'll go to you on this one. This is a Uruguay side with the majority of the players who won the U20 World Cup in Argentina, so they know what it's like to win, and they get the fortune in comparison to other teams that have their own like U20, U23 manager. They get Marcelo Bielsa as their kind of the guy to guide it. So you got someone that knows what it's like to handle youth. He's always been a key advocate on that, and so it just makes it even more difficult. But yeah, I mean, this friendly that's going to be happening this weekend against Uruguay is a good test, and obviously friendlies are not exactly a huge barometer of what could happen in the tournament, but it's good to have a good result there. And yeah, I think the goal is to beat them, and then of course the big task to beat a Brazil side with a lot of these players in Argentina. I mean, it's a lot to ask for.
It's a short tournament. You got to play every 3 days, pretty much like a World Cup. You're going to need pretty much all players to be in top shape and in top form. Hopefully, we do get that when a player gets injured or when somebody needs to come out from the bench. Hopefully, we do get that player that makes a difference. Also, I think we have that depth. If you look at the list, you have those players that can make the difference. That just like Ralph was saying, had a really good year. I mean, it was not easy probably for our head coach to make that final list of just 23 players, but I'm looking forward to the opportunity of taking these big teams these countries that have worked a lot better than us in youth leagues. To be honest, I mean that's also a bargain on this FA right now, on this front office, that they haven't been able to qualify for youth world, for the young World Cups and for the Olympic Games. So that's also something that Robert Harris on front office needs to get off their checklist, I believe, and it would be a great way to start the year off for the national team. Is going to be a huge year with the Copa America, with big games coming up for the qualifiers, also for the senior national team. Let's not forget we're going to play Brazil, and not far from now. So I really hope that we start with the right foot, with the right way, and with the style that we're accustomed to seeing. Also, Roberto, when you have a coach like Carlos Harasaguer coming back, I'm also thinking, hey, we're gonna go back to our roots. We're gonna have set pieces goals again. We're gonna be strong again. We're gonna be mentally strong again in the field, like we haven't been lately with the senior team. I hope those changes are made. I hope we see that right away in the first games, because we're gonna need not only the results, but also I believe see differently from a lot of things differently from our team.
Oh, yeah, Ralph. That's the beauty of football. Sometimes that sometimes you get these results, and I think in an age where we see this kind of advance, especially from a youth level now, especially with like scouting and like trying to analyze it properly more than ever. I don't know where Paraguay stands in regards to that, but I'd imagine they're trying their best to understand that analytically they can allow their teams to perform well and understand that what is the strengths and weaknesses of their opponent and of their team as well. So there is that advantage. And even like Fede said, going back to our roots, going back to someone who, has done it before, has managed the side, albeit a different generation, there is that hope. And I think, getting it right on the first track against Argentina and Uruguay in the first games is going to be a good barometer about where we stand. That if they get positive results there, I mean, that allows them to build confidence going forward. But it's always that final step of going into the final stage where they really fall at the last hurdle. That's always the big Achilles heel with a lot of these Paraguay teams that have done it in the past as well.
Yeah, because I think what Fede mentioned is that you're playing the games in such a short space of time. It becomes that last final stage often becomes kind of a physical thing as much as anything, right? It's not so much, it's how do I maintain my performance playing all these minutes of intense football where I'm used to playing every Friday morning or Saturday morning in youth level. Obviously, I know we have some first team players here, so with first team experience, but talking about the under 17s, under 20s, that's usually been where Paraguay fall down, that the kind of physical preparation isn't there. And you notice that, by the way, when you see a player like Julian Ciso, like if you see a photo of from 2 years ago compared to now, just the preparation, physical preparation since he got to England, compared to what your average Paraguayan youth player was doing. So I think that plays into it a lot. But it's interesting as well what Fede is mentioning about the style of play. And actually, sometimes in these tournaments, when you don't have much time to work together and everything's coming quickly, it's playing very simple football can actually be the most effective, right? We see that at international level a lot as well, that games are usually a bit more low scoring. Teams that are more kind of, well drilled on set pieces and a bit more defensive or cautious actually end up doing much better usually than the really free-flowing sides, because you can't kind of put in a Pep Guardiola style overnight or for 7 games. So that's an interesting thing. I'm thinking especially of the contrast between Paraguay and Uruguay, where you're going to have Bielsa coming in. I'm sure Bielsa wants to play his style and his philosophy. And if we're honest, he might be okay if he doesn't get the results, as long as he sees the style, where I think in the case of Paraguay, they're definitely more interested in results and making sure they can get through. So it's going to be a really good tournament. I was just trying to find out where they might be showing it here in the US, but to be honest, I'm not sure where we can see it. But I'm hoping we can catch those games, because there'll be some really interesting football.
Yeah, it's also a good opportunity for a lot of scouts from European or places from around the world looking at some new talent. We're already seeing that with one player, obviously a highly rated player, Valentin Barco, who is going to be playing in this tournament, just is going to get snapped up by Brighton. So who knows if we have some players on that disposal, that are able to get snapped up by big teams in the continent or in the region or in the world. So I'm very interested. I'm very excited to see what happens. Always these tournaments are very fun, especially when it has something on the line, and hopefully Paraguay can impress in what will be a very tough group. Let's switch gears to what we're seeing now in our domestic league in Paraguay with the start of the Apertura coming next week. Obviously, the reigning champions, the big reigning champions, Fede and Libertad, are really the team to beat. But we're going to focus on two teams that I think obviously are the ones that are going to have a big year for themselves as well, participating in different tournaments. With Olimpia and Cerro. Obviously, we'll start with Olimpia first because they are the team that have gotten in the news recently because of the sanction from FIFA being removed, and also the resignation of Miguel Cardona. So, as president of Olimpia, so they're dealing with hopefully a new president. Obviously a team that's never been shy of criticism when it comes to their presidents. They've had their issues and their kind of controversial ones, but also their sanction being lifted also has led to the signing of Lucas Prato. Lucas Prato seems to be the one, obviously, with a ton of experience playing in Argentina and Brazil, among many other clubs. They're kind of the main number nines that Olimpia are trying to get. As for Cedro, they're also getting into some business. They got rid of some players, but they got some new players as well, being able to hopefully see themselves in a position where they can knock out Libertad, which both teams are doing. Obviously, Paraguay, again, Cedro getting Thiago Vecino of Uruguay, obviously a player over there based there. So yeah, it's going to be a big ask as well for these two teams to crown a really good Libertad side. Obviously, that are going to be very competitive, and I'd imagine they're the favorites to win this tournament yet again. But I think Olimpia and Cedro are really doing their best to knock them off and to knock them off their perch after dominating the Paraguay scene for quite some time.
They got to catch up. They got to catch up because Libertad is paying crazy salaries. They can get whoever they want on this local market. They showed it once again while Olimpia was trying to get their sanctions off, while Cerro was taking a long time to sign players. Libertad said Alejandro Silva is going to be a free agent. Bring him on. You guys want Miguel Jaquet? Olimpia wants Miguel Jaquet. Bring him on to us. Miguel Jaquet also to Libertad. So this is what Libertad has done lately. I mean, they take the best players. They've taken a lot of players from Olimpia, and Libertad still built a great team, and they barely sell. And when they need to re-sign players because those players have big offers from Brazil or other countries, they go, well, yeah, we can renew that contract. We can give you a better offer. And they did just that with several players. That's what Olimpia can't do. That's what several most of the time, these last couple of years haven't been able to do. Also, I mean, maintain some of the really good players. They're actually choosing to sell. They did it once again. Ever since the market opened, they sold probably the best player, which is Damian Bobadilla. He was the best player in the team as the year was ending. So they needed to start signing players and put the fans back at ease. I don't know which signing you guys think was the best one or will be the best one because they haven't started playing. But is it Prato really? How old is he now? 34, 35? How much is he? How many goals did he score last year? I mean, I don't know if the expectations are going to be that high for him. I don't even know if he's going to get a starting role in this team after not being there with Olimpia in the preseason. I heard Chiqui Arce, the head coach of Olimpia, the other day, and his expectations are with Guillermo Paiva having a great season as a starting center forward, maybe even over Bruera, who has not had many opportunities ever since Chiqui Arce has been the head coach. And then you might have Derlis Gonzalez coming back to his best shape after doing the preseason, after cleaning what needed to be cleaned out of that knee in Brazil, just like Saul Salcedo also did. They started the year off from scratch. Saul Salcedo can be a very important defender, especially after they sold one of the best defenders from last year, which is Mateo Gamarra, who went to Brazil. So Chiqui Arce needs to move a couple players around. He still has Richard Ortiz in the midfield to be the leader, and if Derlis Gonzalez is gonna get the starting role, and he's gonna be one of the best players in this team, they're not gonna miss Alejandro Silva. They're not gonna miss what they had to let go. and the big signing so far is Prato. I'm not convinced with him because of what I saw from him last year. He didn't have a starting role in the teams that he was playing in Vélez and in Defensa Justicia, which was the last team that he played for. But I am looking forward, Roberto, Ralph, to seeing Juan Manuel Iturbe back in action in Paraguay. I think this is the big name, guys. To be honest with you guys, this is a player that went through Europe. He played in really big teams, and I think he kind of needs a comeback here in Paraguay. He wants to make a name for himself again. He wants to get that respect back from the fans, just like Cecilio Dominguez did last year. And look how well Cecilio actually ended the year, probably coming back to his best shape and playing really well for the team. And I think the coach has a lot to do with that, Victor Bernay, and they gave him the confidence to stay on the team, to manage the team this year again, at least the start of the year. We'll see how he does with the results, but he's picked these players. He's put the confidence on these guys. And look, Iturbe is going to play on one side. Cecilio is going to play on the other. They just signed a new center forward. Look out for this Cerro Porteño. I want to see how their friendlies go out. They're going to play a couple of friendlies in Colombia this weekend. And yeah, they're not going to have their home stadium for the first games of the Apertura, but I'm looking forward to this team, Ralph, Roberto. I don't know what you guys think, but for me, the big signing of the season so far is Juan Manuel Iturbe for Cerro Porteño.
That's interesting. I mean, Iturbe for me has, like you said, he has the quality his quality is above the Paraguayan league, if we're honest. I mean, yes. He has that it's similar to, I think, to Delis Gonzalez. They're almost too good for this league, but situations in life and things have seen them come back, and it's the same with a few Libertad players. But I think with Cerro and Olimpia, there's always that extra passion that you actually support the club as well, and you want to do well for that team. My issue with Iturbe has always been two things, I guess. One is he going to be mentally playing to the level or the talent that he has, right? Hopefully, if he has something to prove, like you mentioned, we'll see that side of things, and he won't feel that he is too good for this league and then not kind of perform to that top level. And then the other thing has always been tactically, he's not great. He's not great sometimes tactically. I'm remembering the game when Ramon Diaz puts him on against Brazil and he lets Dani Alves in, which I think, is that his last game in Paraguayan soil? I don't know. But, it's that kind of thing. How will he fit and be able to fit into the system? But you're right that I think if you look at him compared to, say, Thiago Vecino, who's going to be the big foreign signing or the international signing, there's much more quality. Vecino's just a player that has done well in Uruguay. He's still a young striker. But when he went, I think he was in Argentina, right? He didn't have a great year. And that's why maybe he's trying to find his feet again here in Paraguay. The Vecino is interesting, though, I think, because he's only 24. So it's a bit like when Bruera came to Nacional, and he was this young striker who'd been doing okay, but you weren't convinced he was good enough for Argentina Primera, and suddenly he was really good at the Paraguayan level. At least Bruera when he's in Nacional, right? He was top scorer. So Vecino maybe has that potential. But I agree in terms of quality, Iturbe is right up there. And then with the Olimpia team, it's really interesting, right? What we're talking about. The key names they're relying on are still the same names from before. Is Derlis Gonzalez, is Richard Ortiz, is Saul Salcedo. Now he's back from injury because they couldn't rely on him last time round. And then Prato he's another big name foreign striker who's aging, and those can really be hit or miss. And recently we had a lot of misses. Olympia's FIFA sanction comes about partly because they didn't pay Adebayor, which never worked out for them. We think about Marcelo Moreno Martins in Cerro, who was being coached by Chiqui Arce. He never managed to get him to work. So these big name foreign strikers that are veterans have not come in recently and been able to perform in Paraguay. The veterans that are doing well in terms of strikers are Oscar Cardoso, less recently Roque Santa Cruz, but in his moment, Roque, who are the Paraguayans that are coming back to their home country. So we'll have to see how Prato goes down. I'm also not convinced that he will necessarily be the big name there they're looking for and can do that job. But we can see, and I think all of this again points to what we're talking about is they need to try and catch up with Libertad. And at the moment, Libertad are just looking so good because two players I'll just mention quickly that have just come back from loan was Elvio Vera, who's been brilliant at Sportiva Emiliano, the winger, and then Ivan Franco, who's come back from Houston Dynamo. And while Ivan didn't have a great time here, I think he found it hard to fit into the system in MLS. We know his quality, talking about quality, it's up there with the Iturbe kind of level. He has the potential to play in Europe if he was to find the right team and the right system that fits him. So, I mean, it's a scary prospect that Libertad team that are coming on the back of winning every tournament possible last year.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. It really is going to be tough to see where both these teams stand. And obviously, we still have to wait and see what other transfers that they'll get, if they're going to get more signings. But, Fede, it looks like right now, especially, and yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens even with this Libertad side, who obviously are going in with a lot of expectation as well. And their Ariano, I think, it's going to be interesting to see if he's able to continue this kind of success. Obviously, young manager, he's had his stints beforehand and whatnot, and knows what it's like to manage. But now he gets a whole first new year, and obviously the expectation for Libertad is to do something well in the continental standpoint. I mean, obviously we still got some time until that, but now's the time for really to put his money where his mouth is and to try to go and win something bigger, not just Paraguayan leagues or domestic titles or whatever.
This is the reason why Garnero actually chose this team, because Libertad gives you the best players you can get out there. Libertad has the best players right now. They have the best squad, but how you manage it, I think, it's really on the coach, and that's something that Garnero did really well. I mean, manage those stars in that locker room, the Roque Santa Cruz, get the best out of Oscar Cardoso, who was probably the best player last year in the National League, and let's see if they can do it again. Let's see if they can motivate these players. Let's see if they can keep squeezing the orange, keep squeezing out of these players that are not that young anymore, but they still do it. It's still enough for the local league. That's why I think Olimpia is choosing a player like Prato also, because you're seeing that right now, the average or the players that solve you these games in the national league are these kind of players, are the players above 30 years old, are the players that have the experience. That's what we're seeing right now in the local league. Maybe in 5 years it's totally different, but you're looking at Luqueño, they're playing with Lucas Barrios. You're seeing a Libertad I just mentioned, Tacuara Cardoso and Roque Santa Cruz, and you look at the other teams, they have those experienced players. I don't know where that's going to take us eventually, but Libertad, they have a spot available in defense because of what happened with Alexander Barbosa. They can fill it up easily with Gilberto Flores, like Ralph was mentioning. I think Luis Cardoso is the one that's actually practicing in that spot during the preseason because Gilberto is obviously with the national team. We'll see who ends up winning that spot there. And in the midfield, Hugo Martinez came back from injury those last games at the end of the year. He's going to get a starting spot probably in the midfield alongside Lucas Sanabria, who was one of the players that I mentioned, had the opportunity to leave the country. He had several offers because of the way he ended last year. He's still very young, so much ahead of him, but he's going to be there in that midfield, probably with Ale Silva, which was the big signing for them. And in attack, they're going to have Ivan Franco fight alongside with Elvio Vera, which is one of the players that is coming back for a spot. And then you have Lorenzo Melgarejo, which is a tremendous player that we didn't get to see much of that last run to get the clausura. So Libertad's going to be back to top shape. Libertad's going to get players eventually back also because they are starting the year with a couple of injured players, but they're the number one candidate, Roberto, and the other teams are going to have to catch up. And I don't know, I'm going to have to start looking into the other rosters, into the other teams to see if there's a surprise maybe this year. But to be honest, we're starting the year talking about Libertad, Olimpia, and Cerro Porteño because they are the teams that should win this Apertura.
Yeah, I'll go to Ralph as well. I mean, the pressure's on Libertad really for any team out there that are trying to spoil the party. I think Libertad are really the big favorites to win this tournament.
Yeah, it's hard to look past them, and we've seen before that they can play the two tournaments because that's another thing we haven't really mentioned is that, of course, these first few weeks, there's not too much happening, but then we hit Libertadores, Sudamericana, and that goes on throughout the whole year. And for a lot of teams, they have to balance, or they have to choose, right? Which will I prioritize? And for Libertad, traditionally they haven't needed to, because they're able to compete in both with that big squad that they have. I mean, one thing just to think about that and just look at the opening games, I do think Cerro have a quite easy run at the start, which is good news for them because they're missing Jean Fernandez for the goalkeeper for the first few games. But they have, for example, Emiliano, who's just lost their coach, who stepped down, surprisingly, as I mentioned. And then they have the promoted teams, I think Dos de Mayo, maybe Sol, and they have General Caballero. Basically, they have the first four games they don't play any big teams. Whereas Libertad have to actually hit the ground running against Guarani, which is a bit of a tougher game. Olimpia, I think, in those first 3-4 games have Nacional, who maybe Nacional won't be focused, because actually Nacional have to play the Copa Libertadores qualifiers. So talking about balancing and prioritizing, maybe they'll prioritize that potential big money game over the league. But still, I mean, I think in terms of the three sides, it's Cerro that have the chance really to get the points on the board and make a good start. Maybe that puts a bit of pressure on Libertad. There's also this idea in Paraguay that you don't need to win both tournaments. Libertad did it last year because they were so good. But you can always kind of let one tournament go and then win the next one if you want to focus on something else. And so that can happen too. If after the first half of the season, which is only 11 games, you see one team is really pretty much going to run away with this league title. Okay, let's take our time, use some of the under 19s, because we have to do that to avoid any fines and points deductions and things, and focus on our continental competition, and we'll give it a good go in the Clausura. So that could also, in theory, happen with Libertad. I think in practice is unlikely because of that big squad they have. But let's see after those first 4 games, when we're talking about how everybody started. That's going to be really, really interesting.
No, I just wanted to go back on the Olympia situation, guys, because it is finally over for Olympia. I mean, they were able to get those big numbers that they had on their shoulders off of them, especially the Adebayo situation. And I think Nico Dominguez was the other one. The Adebayo, just to put it in numbers, was around $700,000. I mean, we're talking a huge debt. It was not easy for them to get this money. I was actually hearing the press conference from the President Cardona, and he was talking about a number around $60 million, which is pretty much what Olympia has been paying these last couple of years, trying to get the sanctions off of them. And this is huge, I believe, not only for Olympia, but for the Paraguayan game itself. I mean, Olympia is one of those teams that's always signing big players, is always getting ready to fight for the title, and they've been kind of on a knot lately, Roberto. They've had their hands stuck between their pockets, and every money they could have taken, it was going straight to FIFA. They weren't able to move their money around. They weren't able to sign players. So this is going to be big, I believe, for the 2024 season. Olympia is coming back to shape. Olympia is finally off all these millions of dollars that they needed to pay.
Yeah, no, I think it's a big release from their big pressure from their shoulder that's being released from them. But yeah, we have to wait and see what they can do, and how much little time that they have to be able to get people. I'm sure they have a plan, and I'm curious to see that Olympia won't be able to mess up this time around, especially after seeing what Libertad do. The same thing for Cedro. I think they need to understand that they're not trying to see Libertad win any more titles, that they want to go back and win it. Cedro, they've 4 straight second place finishes. That's not good for Cerro. They definitely want to do that. And for Olympia, they want to go back and win titles again, because that's their DNA. That is what they've been always accustomed to. So obviously we'll wait and see what happens to all these teams as we preview the Apertura starting next week. We'll have a look on that starting next week. And obviously, yeah, in a lot of tournaments. I'm really excited for what's going to be a really good 2024 for all of us, and hopefully with a lot of success as well. So to close out this episode of Guarani Vision, for myself, Roberto Rojas, Fede Perez, and Ralph Hannah, thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.